Welcome to the Qredible Live Broadcast. We are so excited about our esteemed guest today, David Vaillencourt. Welcome. As most of you who will see this know, David is a cannabis industry standards expert, which is a very timely thing to be, and we at Qredible are a big fan of that. So I'm going to give you a little bit about his background. So supporting his vision to ensure the safety, credibility, and certainty of the cannabis industry and its products. He is the founder of the S3 Collective, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. S3C bridges the gap between safety and science and standards to inform and guide global policy that protects public health and safety while enabling a functional marketplace. He's also the chief executive officer of the GMP Collective and supports a team of seasoned life science industry experts across operational, production, quality, compliance, and supply chain units. He's the vice-chair of the Committee D37 on Cannabis for ASTM International, and he's the co-founder of the Cannabis Compliance Alliance. And I better stop there, or we're going to take up all our time with your incredible credentials. So, welcome.
Not a very ambitious guy, is he?
No, yeah. All that's just, I get bored easily, right? So much time in the day.
You're here to make a difference, and we like that. So welcome. We're so glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Joy and Brian and Taylor.
Absolutely. So we thought it would be great if you kind of start off just telling us a little bit about your background, your journey in the industry. Obviously, a lot of people who watch this will know you, but let's kind of give them the high level and then we can dive into the combo today.
Yeah. So how did I get to wear those 4 hats that, we don't have the ticker feature yet to scroll. No, thank you so much. So, I'm a scientist by education. I got a master's in science and essentially environmental and geology hybrid. And shortly after that, I worked in lab testing. So I was actually on EPA and DoD work. So it was all government. And that's kind of one of the common themes. And the core word was legally defensible data. So, we've got Superfund sites with major oil spills, name your catastrophe, and we need to know how bad it is. Is it going to get into the, water down the street and end up in an aquifer? We need to know that. And so that was my world. I worked in the oil spill. I kind of moved around quite a bit. Worked on the oil spill assessment, the Deepwater Horizon, in New Orleans. That was a fun couple of years. And that's where things really started to connect for me in terms of consulting and working ourselves out of a job by, providing the legally defensible data based on managing, the responsible party, BP, state entities, Fish and Wildlife, biologists, and federal regulators to oversee this project. It was then that I met some folks that were entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry, and I was like, you have a cool PhD from Purdue that's here making this solventless product with the first patented vape pen is 2015 in California. And he's telling me about this. And I'm like, do you have SOPs, which standard operating procedures for folks that may not know. And I'm getting this look from this guy who's the CEO of the company. And it makes sense. I can see him moving in his head. It makes sense, but no. And I'm like, are you even legal? And he just kind of laughs. He's like, yeah, this is, California Compassionate Use Act, blah, blah, blah. So fast forward to moving to Colorado for my last real job, as I like to say in the quote real world. And I got connected with some folks in the industry and found myself having a hard time saying no to things because I'm curious, and inquisitive and just want to make an impact in the world, I think, as you said. And it's easy to get bored in jobs pretty easily. What do I do with all my knowledge? And so ended up in Toronto for a meeting in June of 2017 at this thing called ASTM International Committee Week. And I knew enough by the end that, when you've got major government agencies there from Health Canada, you've got folks flying in from Israel and New Zealand, and we're talking about industry consensus standards and market relevant and all these buzzwords. I was like, I need an acronym book to understand this. In addition, and then I need the shorthand of the 140-page book for this 125-year-old process. But there's something there, and I kind of just followed it, drank the Kool-Aid, and next thing you know, I'm here running the GMP Collective, as you mentioned, helping folks with a lot of experts from food, pharma, dietary, you name it, that understand this industry and how to apply, meet the industry where they're at, how to apply these best practices or shared set of rules to make this industry credible and safe for consumers, because really that's what it's all about. If we don't have safety and credibility for consumers and trust in the marketplace, then we don't have a marketplace.
Amen. Let's just drop the mic right there.
Well said.
Real efficient.
That's right. Well, so as part of that effort, you've been very obviously you created the GMP Collective, which has then led to S3. But I want to talk about sort of the GMP Collective and what all that entails.
Yeah, so it's been a fun journey with recognizing that what are these shared set of rules. So for example, starting in like 2018, some of the first projects I was working on was in Canada. I was actually bouncing between New Brunswick, Vancouver, BC, and a few other provinces, and helping folks prepare for export to the European Union, where good manufacturing practices, that's what GMP stands for. And I think it's really important to break that down and not overthink that word. It's good. It's not mediocre, but it's not necessarily the gold standard. It's manufacturing, and you could substitute that for distribution, agricultural, like production, and then practices like practice. We practice doing things in a certain way. And so that's really what GMPs are at its root. There's different flavors, especially when you're dealing with a pharmaceutical. It's based on risk. So we're going to produce the cannabis plant and we're going to export that to Europe. And that's never been done before, which is, the reality at that point in 2018. How do you translate pharmaceutical standards that are based on like single molecules and fancy, chemical extractions to this plant product? Or do you take some of the food best practices? Like we were working within the EU's guidelines about having to kind of interpret and help folks figure that out and present, sufficient documentation to say, trust me. That's ultimately what we're doing, is trust me with paperwork to prove it. And so that's really what we've been doing. So I brought in, again, experts, because I'm not the expert. I don't have a pharma background. I learned that like month, one on the job. So I would bring in and manage these amazing experts that were, half retired, a lot of them that had done this for 40 years to really help the industry navigate where they need to be.
And that's been a for-profit business that has sort of led to a nonprofit called the S3 Collective, and just sort of talk about why that exists and why that shift took place.
Yeah, so my advisors have always challenged me, like, are you running a for-profit business or a not-profit? Your metrics are based on how much volunteer time you're donating and helping out with rulemaking in different states, not because anybody's paying me, but because it was the right thing to do. And so it kind of became abundantly clear with this gap in where the industry's at, that there needs to be a nonprofit and unbiased, impartial entity that can, hold the hands of whether it's regulators, because we need regulators at the table. People don't like the rules. Regulators have limited resources. How do we help them? You can't just do that. You can't just knock on a regulator's door and say, trust me here. That's called a lobbyist, I'm pretty sure. So, we can't do that. And then, so we have to do that in an objective and unbiased way. So we need to bring everybody together, help facilitate where are the biggest priorities in terms of problems and gaps in the marketplace, and how do we solve that? And it, can ultimately be, hey, industry agrees upon these shared set of rules and self-regulates. And whether it's the FDA or, the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, or you name the state, says you're meeting our minimum requirements. You're going above and beyond because the minimum's just not going to cut it because it's not fully fleshed out for safety and quality. And you're good. And we're just going to stand back and thank you for doing that. Or we'll incorporate them. And that's where we help work with regulators to help them understand how to incorporate these standards into, the rules and regulations, which is standard in almost every other industry, but it's, cannabis, we like to be new and special.
Right. And I think that really brings up a lot of important implications. Like what are the, we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask you really what those critical improvements are necessary. But before I do, I heard you say once, and I really love this quote, that I heard you say that we're not in an unregulated industry or completely unregulated industry. We're in a misregulated industry.
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about that, because I believe there's so much power in that statement that, therein lies the challenge and the opportunity. So talk a little bit about that misregulated comment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian. That is absolutely on point. I'm glad it stuck for good reason. It sounds like, when states started regulating cannabis, right? And I'll think back to, it was just the 10th year anniversary of adult use cannabis in the state of Colorado, where is home for me for the last 7 years. And it was a bold move, right? Let's put ourselves in the time machine 10 years ago and think about, there was some limited adult, medical marketplaces, but to just sell weed, like you can go to any brick and mortar store, these brick and mortar stores, and just buy weed without a card, a medical card. That's kind of a big deal. The feds were just, busting Harborside not that long ago with a, regulated California marketplace. So the focus on that was compliance, diversion, based on the Cole memo, right? That was basically, don't let the product get out of the market, out of the state. Don't cross the boundaries of the state. Don't get into the hands of kids, and keep it away from, gangs and cartels and money laundering. That was what we needed. Safety, quality, like product safety, like pharmaceuticals. That's not in that list. And so that's where security cameras and this track and trace system came in. Not to say that all those things are wrong and we should throw all that out, but it's misregulated. This is a consumer product. We're eating it, we're ingesting it, we're inhaling it. What's the safety protocols?
Yeah, it's really missing the mark. And, a key element to me is that the goal of regulation should be entirely about supporting the development of a legal industry that's focused on, first of all, displacing the entrenched illegal market that exists here, because that's really dangerous, while implementing safeguards to public health and safety. So that's going to require sort of somewhat of a strict regulated cannabis market, which is somewhat difficult in the US because we have basically every state's like a country,
Yep.
because it's not federally, mandated or legal. So we've got so many different testing requirements. Some have no real standards. So a lot of the work you're doing is really about developing those policy and standards as a critical first step, something that all these countries in our United States country, all these different states can actually agree on. So it helps to really standardize and create that transparent process that's safe.
Yep.
And can be, the other thing I want to sort of have you comment on, it's not about just the creation of those standards, which is a task in of itself to get everybody to agree across all these states. But then what good is a policy if it can't be enforced or tracked properly? And I'm a technology guy. It's no big mystery that the only way to do that is through technology control. So just talk to me a little bit about, sort of the logical path.
Mm-hmm. So let's see, where do we, maybe I'll start from the end in mind for a second, and then use that to establish the framework and go from there. So, the food marketplace, the food industry. You go to Safeway, King Soopers, Shaw's, or whatever, Walmart, Target, Costco, you name it, right? You go there and there's products on the shelf there. Costco has very strict contract agreements to get those products on the shelf, and it's focused around quality. It includes inspections, on-site audits, the right to audit, because Costco is going to limit their liability. They're not just going to put any old product on there. It needs to be safe for their consumers. They don't want to recall on their name. And so that's how a mature marketplace works. You've got the minimum regulations, but then you have this framework to ensure that these products are safe because the buyers demand it. It's all about responsibility, right? And risk and exposure. So with that, how do we get there? Right? We've got 39 states with 39 different frameworks and political, challenges. We don't have a single label that's in common, right? Like or a universal symbol. Like, does this have THC in it? Could it get me high or intoxicating? Is intoxicating even the right word? Right now we're getting into some of the weeds here, but like, we need to come together, at least a representative group, and say, look, we're better off by figuring this out together. And if I want to have some control over the outcome because I'm the business owner, I know what it's like day to day and what's practical. So we need to come topic specific and identify those major problems, and not just the problems, but solutions. We've got to be solutions oriented. And then the regulators are very open. They're in the same situation, and the same with the labs. Nobody wants to do a bad job. Nobody wants to make this harder than it needs to be. Like, we could all be retired on a boat, on a yacht, just party, and like, wouldn't everybody just want to do that and have the AI technology just run everything for us and even delivers the weed to us in the drone? Like, heck yeah. But we have to agree on these principles so that commerce can operate. And so that's a journey in which the ASTM process is solved for industries from railroads to space flight to rubber on tires and brake pads. Like, these are life critical parts that we need minimum safety standards, performance standards to say, I will commit to doing X.
Absolutely. And yesterday, interesting, I spoke to a CEO that told me that consumers don't care about safety in this industry. And I almost fell out of my chair, because what he did is he paralleled it to, like the food industries. Like, are people really, going and reading and researching and doing all these things? And I said, well, no, because they know that the infrastructure exists that is asking those questions, that is vetting and verifying it. So, they're, it's more a matter of they feel confident that the FDA, the USDA, and other agencies are watching and auditing and regulating. So, are you going to feel safe eating lettuce if there was no standards or any way of knowing if there was a recall? Are you going to feel safe going to a restaurant if there was no health inspector? you know,
Mhm.
I don't think so. And the fact of the matter is, the danger in this industry is believing that the entire cannabis market is from the smoking side that came from the illegal market. And that's what I hear so frequently that makes me want to bang my head against the wall. That, and sure, the folks have been smoking for years now, and they're now buying legal, or maybe not, right? That's yes, we do need to care about them, but these folks should at least care about getting the product as advertised, right? Which we know we have a big problem where they're saying, oh, it's got this much THC in it, and it really doesn't. Why? Because there's no controls, there's no safety. You can falsify a lab report as easy as having an Adobe Acrobat, software program. That's it. I mean, that's
And
how
what's a month for
it
that?
happens.
It's easy. Yeah.
And by the way, wink, wink. Hey, Dave, make sure my THC levels, you're my lab, come out on a certain level. Okay. And as I said before in a previous broadcast, one of our sales guys was being pitched by a lab saying that's their specialty. Their specialty is if you need 2 + 2 = 5, they're good at that. I mean, okay, well, that doesn't really sound like a good controlled industry. So whether I'm one of those traditional smoking dudes that came in from, the illegal market because that's the way I am, or if you're the emerging consumer like myself who has used cannabis to replace a sleep aid at night, a prescription sleep aid, and is quite happy with the results, I want to know who I'm buying it from. I want to know that it's safe. I want to know that there's no microtoxins in lead. And in fact, Taylor from Canada, Taylor lives in Canada, and I'll tell you, they did a study and found out of illegal samples that were actually, seized. They found that 86%, so 19 out of the 22 of the illegal samples, contain multiple pesticides. I mean, all sorts of bad things, which were several hundred times above what Health Canada had established as a limit. So if that's going on in Canada, do you think that this is going on in the US? Are we just
Exactly.
better than that?
Right.
No.
If you don't ask the questions, it doesn't exist, right? Yeah. No, it's a mess. I mean, and to your point of the CEO that said that to you, Brian, earlier, I can't just help but first roll my eyes and just wonder, like, what on earth is going on. But that's the reality of the marketplace, unfortunately. So we've got to accept that. Unfortunately, how do we shift that? I mean, the basic question of then why is the illicit market so huge still? Why is it 25 to 50% based on the marketplace, based on states? You can't just blame it on taxes. Blame it on trust. If I've been smoking for 40 years, I know my guy down the street. I trust him. And the argument is I don't need an HPLC and a C of A to trust him. I know him. In a sophisticated marketplace, and as the cannabis marketplace is evolving, we use C of A's as a marker of trust, right? To see that those products are, don't have contaminants above established limits. But then now we don't even know that those C of A's are trustworthy because people can falsify them, especially in the unregulated, CBD and hemp intoxicants cannabinoid marketplace. Well, now we're back to, I don't trust. I don't even know what to trust. So yeah, of course, yeah, they're not going down the rabbit hole of research, because I get lost going down that rabbit hole, and this is my life every day for 7 years. So it's, yeah, just because consumers aren't doing the research I'm doing does not mean anything. It means there's a basic trust issue we have to solve.
Well, I listen, I saw this, you had a great post today that said we all come from different industries. And you're right. I mean, this is a fairly nascent industry. So it's not like, I came out of the womb in the cannabis industry. I mean, I did grow up in the 70s and had some leftover 60s, but the issue is that the industry I come from is the mortgage industry. And, I developed technology that actually provided accountability, that automated and reduced the cost of compliance, but so the regulators could see what's going on and all the parties in the process can understand what's happening. And I'll tell you, I had the same conversations. I would go to CEOs and they'd say to me, well, why do I have to do that? Why do I care about that? I mean, if the loan eventually just gets sold in the secondary market, then I'm fine. Yeah, but you don't know all the bad stuff that can hurt the consumer and hurt the underlying securities and crash the market. And, we certainly saw what an unregulated market does and a wild, wild west industry does to the mortgage market. It killed trillions of dollars of people's retirements. And unfortunately, people lost their lives because they were killing themselves over losing their retirement. And here, and people used to say, well, we're not saving lives, but in this industry we could be, like, and because we don't know what is in these products, and this is important. So if we don't have the standards that are set by the industry, exactly what happened in the mortgage industry will happen here. The adults enter the room, the pendulum swings all the way to the other side, and now you're looking at unintended consequences. And by the way, dozens of mortgage companies went out of business when that pendulum swung. So, it's almost like a matter of self-preservation. If you're going to preserve the industry and your own business, you better get involved and be part of the solution as opposed to being a casualty of the problem. I'll get off my soapbox now because I know you and I are singing in the same choir.
Yeah,
but
well, Brian, yeah, go ahead.
No, but so that really leads to, what do you think are the changes that we need to make? I mean, what are the systematic things that we need to jump on to make this happen?
Well, that was one of the amazing things when we first got to sit down, after talking a bit on LinkedIn for about a year and then, met up this fall in person. I was like, wow, another story, the mortgage industry, and that had financial implications and people's lives implications, right? As you rightfully called out. That's the playground industry. That's the roller coaster industry. That's the tire industry. Like when cars were novelty, that's what we are today. We're novelty. This is a product to a new consumer. Oh my God, I can buy weed and get gummies. Are they going to go back a second time though? Depends on the experience and the consistency. And so it's that same story. And so to get to your question there of like, what do we need to do? Where do we go? We have to be solutions oriented. We can't be, here's the problem and check it over the fence, because if you want the FDA to solve it, I don't know that anybody actually wants the FDA to solve it. I don't even think the FDA wants to solve it. Like they're going to come down with frameworks that nobody's going to like, and then they're going to have to enforce it. This is the same thing. That the one thing I want to just add for context too is this has happened before, right? This is why did the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 get approved in the United States? Why was the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938 approved? There were major catastrophic events because of a lack of regulations that we don't have the time to go into the details that caused Congress to act. And what do I see today? I see, even though I live in Colorado where I have access to plenty of legal cannabis, I can go to the smoke shop that is literally 2 blocks from my house and buy HHC, THCP, and I know that those products are not what they say they are because the studies confirm, just as the Canadian studies do. And that market is over $20 billion today. And that came up overnight. And the entire state regulated marketplace, adult and medical use combined, is on par with that $20 billion figure. So we have a equivalent marketplace that is completely unregulated. And how many it's in my safety days, there's a safety pyramid. You have enough near misses. It's just simple, data and statistics. Like you have enough near misses, and then you get a minor injury. And then you get enough minor injuries, you get a major. You get enough major, you get a death. So think about that in the industry. You've got enough people that have a bad experience with a 100 milligram gummy. And then some people end up in the hospital. Some people that have an allergic reaction, and then they're immunocompromised. Then you start getting deaths. And that's what we're facing right now. If we don't solve that and say, it's not about prohibition, but it's about what are the minimum standards these products need to meet? Do they have to have a security system? Do they have to have product testing and CFAs? We have to have these conversations and start agreeing and throwing out solutions.
And we have to have a framework that's transparent, and one where those lab reports cannot be falsified, where lab shopping is not all about, collusion and who's got the best answer to what I need it to be. So those things, I mean, there are solutions out there, and you and I have talked a lot about what they are. They involve people, process, and technology. Those three things have to go together. Somebody asked me yesterday, "Oh, this Schedule 3 thing's exciting. I mean, who's the big winner?" And I said, "Well, financially, the industry is going to win because this 280E thing is going to go away." But they're like, "Oh, from a health perspective, that's going to be better." And I said, "Not necessarily, because first of all, I don't think it's immediately going to throw in all the standards that are necessary. That's not going to happen. The FDA already has its hands full in many, many other areas. There may actually be more confusion, but who's going to be the one big winner is, and people haven't thought about this, is the black illicit market." Because when it goes from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, now you're not getting in as much trouble when you get caught. So, I mean, think about it. That's pretty simple. The illicit market should sleep well at night now, knowing that they're moving from 1 to 3, because now the consequences aren't as bad. So if we have no standards and no confidence in the legal market, and the illicit market is now everybody can do what they want with just a slap on the wrist, are we really solving the problem? I mean, I'm not saying the rescheduling is a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a bad thing. And by the way, I think it should be completely descheduled. It's a whole nother conversation, because it's a medicinal and wellness herb is the way I look at it. Right. But in order for that to take place in any of that, whether you don't get rescheduled, descheduled, or whatever, safety, transparency, quality is job one in this industry. And I'm just seeing the same shades of people shaking their head and saying no. So we got to get this done. This is so critical. And one of the last things I really wanted to cover is the great work you're doing at ASTM. I mean, I will be there. Qredible will be represented at ASTM this month in Kentucky. And so we will be there. We're actively on that work group. Can you just give a little plug as to why that's so important and why people should be getting their rear ends to Kentucky?
Brian, I love it. Yeah, I mean, took me 27 minutes to get to the word you just said, framework, right? We need that framework. That's what we're doing at ASTM. We are rolling up our sleeves and developing that framework. We're a solutions oriented, like it's a cycle, it's a process. So we come, you've got the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. That's a 202-year-old institution that solved this problem for the credibility of medicines in 1820 when 11 physicians came together. Right? We've got them. We've got government. We've got academic institutions. We've got the folks at Qredible that come together because you bring a piece of the puzzle. You're not the epidemiologist, but you've got the data tech solution. So you need to be in there talking about the lab specification standards. So we're developing everything from lab standards, test methodologies, sampling, what are good cultivation practices? What's an intoxicating cannabinoid? How do we define that? That's been a year in the making of conversations, weekly conversations. And we come to the meetings, and that's when we all get together and really work on some of I call it, the biggest kinks that we have to work out with some of these standards together in person, roll up our sleeves. And then we go out, have a beer, enjoy our bourbon, because we're going to be in Kentucky, and have a good time and network. And the relationships we come away with, New Zealand to Australia and Israel to in between, the global leaders are there. And guess what? It costs nothing to show up. It's $115 to be a member a year. That is the lowest barrier to entry to participate and shape the industry that meets the World Trade Organization's principles that has been in use for 125 years.
Absolutely. And David, we are going to have you back. I would love to do an hour-long kind of webinar, because this is such an important topic, and I think it's important to get through ASTM, and really have something about, okay, what happened at ASTM. If people aren't there, we need to educate them on what's going on, what's happening in the framework. So I'd love to have you back. I personally want to thank you for, I really believe, your selfless work that you've been doing in this industry. Because there's a lot of people that are, okay, how do I make tons of money doing this? That has not been your driving factor. Your driving factor has been, how do we make the industry safe? How do we make consumers safe and create a better and safer industry? So seriously, I mean this very sincerely. I'm a big fan of yours and the work that you've selflessly been doing in this industry. And I will continue to listen and follow and use you as one of the greatest resources in this industry. So thank you for being with us today. And thank you for the great work you're doing in the industry. And looking forward to having you back real soon.
I can't wait, Brian. Well, thank you. And, it takes a village, and I'm very grateful to have you as part of our village and being part of the solution. So couldn't do it without you. Thanks, guys. This is
Perfect.
great.
See you in Kentucky.
See ya.
Okay.